Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong says that the standards of his ruling People's Action Party have not slipped after 2 of his MPs stepped down and resigned from the party today over what's been described as an inappropriate relationship. Chuan-Jin quit as Speaker of Parliament and as MP for Marine Parade GRC, while Cheng Li Hui ended her stint as MP for Tampines GRC. There are now 3 vacant PAP seats, with former Senior Minister Tharman Shanmugaratnam having stepped down to run for President. And Transport Minister Estiswaran's future, well, that is also uncertain amid a corruption probe. But Mr. Lee said that this will not trigger a general election now, as other MPs in the affected constituencies will ensure that residents are looked after.
There is such a thing as appropriate or inappropriate behavior, propriety and impropriety. And we expect our MPs and certainly ministers to know the difference. But in dealing with these situations, which are human situations, you also have to be cognizant of human frailties and conscious of the impact that our actions will have on innocent parties, on families, on spouses, on the children, and deal with them as sensitively as you can, but upholding our fundamental requirement to maintain our responsibilities and our trust with Singaporeans.
Prime Minister Lee says the resignations of the 2 PAP MPs were necessary to maintain the high standards of propriety and personal conduct that the party has upheld all these years. Mr. Lee says he will nominate a new speaker at the next Parliament session on the 1st of August and make a ministerial statement. Geraldine Yap with more.
A rare event at the Istana. A media conference called by Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. He addressed what he described as an inappropriate relationship between Mr. Tan and Ms. Cheng.
It saddens me to discover that these 2 PAP MPs have fallen short of the high standards of propriety and personal conduct that we expect of all PAP MPs.
Mr. Tan is the 2nd Speaker of Parliament to step down over such an incident. In 2012, Michael Palmer resigned as Speaker following an affair with a People's Association staff member.
I just want to ask a few questions around timing.
Yes.
You mentioned that you had this conversation with Mr. Tan in February.
Yes.
It's not clear to me how long this relationship had been going on when you had that conversation with them, first. Second, the timing when you dealt with the Michael Palmer incident suggests quite a different timeline.
Yes.
Far more quick and abrupt.
Yes.
And third, on timing, now that you have 4 vacant seats in Parliament, does that affect the way you think about when you're going to call the next general elections?
Well, I spoke to Speaker Tan Chuan-Jin and Cheng Li Hui most recently in February. I learned of this sometime after the last general election in 2020. I do not know when it began, but they were spoken to, counseled. Unfortunately, the matter didn't close, and so it came to the conversation, the hard conversation we had in February this year. As for comparison with Michael Palmer, I think it depends on the situation of the case. As I said, you've got to look at the circumstances and the spouses and the family conditions, at how you can manage this as sensitively as you can and yet do your duty. And it depends on the person's response as well as the specifics. So I don't think it is possible to make direct comparisons. As for the general election, I have no plan to call an immediate general election. A general election is due by 2025. We are in the second half of the present government's term. We've just opened Parliament recently. We have a full agenda for this term. We are working at it, and that's what we will focus on. And in the GRCs where there's a member missing, the other members of the GRC will step up and will make sure that the constituents are well looked after. That's one of the advantages of having a GRC.
Mr. Lee says Mr. Tan offered to resign in February and he accepted the resignation. But the Prime Minister said he needed time to ensure that Mr. Tan's constituents will continue to be taken care of. Mr. Lee said he told Mr. Tan again that the relationship has to stop. But he later found out that the relationship continued. Thus, he decided that Mr. Tan had to quit immediately.
If the behavior is not outrageous or scandalous to begin with, and the MP heeds the advice, corrects it, makes amends, puts a stop to what should not happen, then we will not punish them severely and automatically kick them out or immediately kick them out. Because what you do and what consequences the person should face also depends on the positions they hold and other factors, the circumstances, the family situations, how inappropriate or egregious the behavior was.
The resignations are the latest in a string of high-profile issues involving PAP MPs recently. These include the corruption probe that saw Transport Minister S. Iswaran arrested. Mr. Lee said no system can be completely infallible. He stressed that these cases are not an example of PAP's slipping standards, but rather how the party deals with allegations against its MPs.
In Mr. Iswaran's case, the matter came up not from any external report, but because CPIB came across the issue while doing another investigation, and they told me. I said, check it out. After a few months, they came back to me. They said, there's something to this. We want to open a formal investigation. I studied their paper. I said, yes, proceed. And that's what they have done. And it will go through to its full conclusion.
He added that in the case of Mr. Tan and Ms. Cheng, efforts were made to get them to put things right. When that didn't work, they had to go.
That's how the system has to function. Sometimes things cluster up, but we make sure we put them right, and I hope I put them right, and we will be able to set the right tone for a long time to come. Because you are not just maintaining high standards for one election term or one generation of leaders. You have to make sure that you can maintain this, sustain this, feel that sense of mission and responsibility, and be able to transmit that beyond your term into the next generation and imbue the next generation of people who come forward to serve, as well as people who grow up as mature Singapore citizens and voters, to understand that this is how our system works and this is how it has to work in order for Singapore to succeed.
Well, for more, we're joined by Eugene Tan, an associate professor at Singapore Management University's School of Law and political analyst. Eugene, first, PM Lee is set to deliver a ministerial statement when Parliament sits. That's in August. What are the issues that the Prime Minister will have to address?
Jill, I think that would be a very important ministerial statement. I mean, ministerial statements are generally important, but I think this one has added significance given the recent spate of incidents. I think it is a legitimate question whether the ruling party has fallen short of its high standards. So I think that's something that the Prime Minister, will have to address, because it also speaks about his government. So he'll be speaking as Prime Minister and not as the leader of the ruling party. But he will have to be able to persuade Singaporeans, that whatever has happened in many ways reflects how the system works. And more importantly, right, what is it that the government and the party, what are they going to do, to ensure that these incidents, do not arise? Because it is certainly important that you're able to identify and deal with these significant issues as they arise. But I think it is also worth bearing in mind, that it is also important, that these issues perhaps, shouldn't have cropped up in the first place. So I think all eyes would be very much on, not just how PM is going to look ahead, what is he going to do to try to strengthen the system of government that he has just highlighted, which is so important to Singapore. But also, what are the tangible changes, that he'll be putting in place as head of government, to ensure that Singapore will not be rocked, by similar incidents, in the future, because this has hit Singapore's standing and reputation significantly, in my view.
Professor Tan, how the government has responded certainly is in the spotlight. It certainly has been discussed, and it will continue to be. And it is just the latest, what's happened today with the 2 resignations, just the latest in a spate of controversies for the ruling party. But the question will be, and you and I were sitting here for GE 2020, and the government at that time, the PAP, earned quite a considerable amount of trust from the people, a slight erosion of the vote share, but nonetheless, they won the mandate of the people. The question will be, what is the damage, if any, to the capital of trust that has been earned by the government? What dent to the reputation of the party?
I think there is that reputational hit, right? If there's one isolated incident, perhaps people might be willing to attribute that to an isolated incident, but when you have a series of incidents, I think it is a legitimate question. But I think more than just the damage to the ruling party's reputation as well as the government, I think the larger question is whether the PAP government has fallen short of the standards of the high standards, that it has always set for itself. And which Singaporeans, over the last 60 years have come to expect, as well as demand, of the PAP government. So I think it's really more than just, that reputational hit, which, of course, I think there will be a political price that they will have to pay. And so now, what's going to happen, I think, with the ministerial statement is that they will have to address, very sensitively and in a very open and transparent manner, what is it that the government is going to do, to ensure that there is no further erosion, and to ensure, how we can continue to make the system even more robust in terms of the checks and balances, the good governance.
Eugene, stay with us. We have more questions to pose to you in just a minute. Meanwhile, Culture, Community and Youth Minister Edwin Tong was seen at the Meet the People session at Kembangan, Chai Chee this evening. He's covering for his former colleague, Tan Chuan-Jin.
Well, in an online post after his visit, he shared that MP for Mountbatten, Lim Biao Chuan, and McPherson MP Tin Pei Ling, they will join the Marine Parade GRC team in attending to residents there for now. CNA spoke to him earlier about Mr. Tan's resignation.
Not at this point in time. Okay, I'm going to see some of the other grassroots and activists at KCC, so I have no comments at this point in time. Okay.
Anything to reassure residents?
I'll just make one other point. Okay, I think it's important that we have stability, and my colleagues and I will continue with the good work that's been done here, and we'll ensure that our priority is the well-being and care for the residents at KCC.
Mr. Tong arrived at this block after 6 in the evening and was seen speaking to residents. CNA was not allowed in those sessions. Nearly 20 residents showed up to speak to Mr. Tong before he left at around 8 p.m. A Social and Family Development Minister, Masagos Zulkifli, who leads the Tampines GRC team, says that Mr. Desmond Chu will replace Ms. Cheng as chair of the Town Council. Mr. Masagos says that under the new leadership, Tampines Town Council will continue to operate smoothly and uninterrupted. He adds that the Tampines MPs will ensure residents always receive support. All right, this latest incident, it now means that there are empty positions, Prof. Tan, in several places. I mean, we know at least 3 of them. What do you think will the situation be as far as that's concerned? How is it going to impact?
Well, I think, residents in the affected GRC. So here we are looking at Marine Parade, and Tampines. I think that there would be concerns as to whether one fewer MP, and particularly in Marine Parade GRC's case, where Mr. Chuan-Jin was the anchor leader in that GRC. There will be these concerns about whether the residents' interests, needs, and concerns, will be adequately dealt with. Clearly, we see that the ruling party is in damage control mode. They have assured residents that other MPs, will step up. And I think, going by past practice, I think that's something that the ruling party has done. But I don't think that, it will erase completely, the concerns of the residents. So we shouldn't be surprised if the party were to deploy retired MPs, to help to support, the remaining MPs in each of those GRCs, as well as, deploying experienced veteran activists from other constituencies. But there could also be, another gap, in West Coast GRC. Of course, that depends on the outcome of the CPIB probe into Minister Iswaran. So I think there are all these gaps, as you pointed out, and the party will have to double up its efforts, given that the Prime Minister has indicated that, that he will not call for snap polls, and I think we could also read into that there will not be by-elections as well. So the residents in those affected constituencies will be looking at how, the party measures up.
Okay, so what you've mentioned is the short-term measures that can be taken, but the incident still means there are empty positions in several PAP GRCs, and PM, although he has ruled out an immediate general election, still, if we were to look forward, how do you envision possible changes in the GRC lineups when the next polls come round?
I think that there will be, for the party, a high level of concern, let's say with Marine Parade GRC, right, where Mr. Tan was the anchor minister, and you had the Workers' Party giving the PAP lineup a very keen fight, in the last general election. The contest was even keener in West Coast GRC. Although I think it would be fair to say that, regardless of the CPIB probe, one would be very surprised if Mr. Iswaran were to be fielded again, let's say even if he was cleared of the allegations. And that one was a much keener contest, against the PSP, the Progress Singapore Party, which has always campaigned on the basis that the PAP has fallen short of its high standards. So I think you would see in these two GRCs, the need for the ruling party to shore up, the lineup there. And that would mean, having to move, some of the heavyweight MPs, or ministers from the other constituencies, to beef up, the lineup, given that these two constituencies were very keenly contested.
There can be no doubt that this will obviously, the GRC system has had opposition before from opposition parties, right? It may provide them with some ammunition as well, because now you have GRC members who have to double hat for their, fallen comrade, for want of another word. Does that impact the efficiency of the town council at all?
I think it does, right? Even if MPs double up, the fact is that the load is now divided, among one fewer MP in each of those affected GRCs. And many of the other MPs, particularly if they are holding ministerial appointments, they would have their normal ministerial duties to attend to as well. So I would say that, that there will be this tremendous pressure, and so there will be the need for the ruling party, to deploy extra resources, right? Whether in terms of experienced party activists or even, retired MPs, who are familiar with the ground and who still have that rapport, with residents. So they have these important tasks at hand, and residents will be watching how quickly and how well, the party keeps to its word, that the services will not be affected, as well as representation of their needs and their concerns.